So, guys, so far, whatever we have written, the classes, integrations, code, snippets. So, for all these logical things, we have tried test coverage. So, without a test coverage, we cannot push the this, let's say, this particular Apex class, we cannot push it to the production. So, always we need to have any code that you write. Of course, the testers are there to do testing against the system, like in QA, and developers are there to do a test in the unit test. We were doing the code and then you're executing a sample record and checking it out. That is something a developer does unit test. So this doesn't suffice um, the test coverage or to say so that's something that this is working exactly or accurate. There may be a chance that we are fooling the system. So that's the reason. So every class they will have a test class associated to that, and the test class would run like be it you are a developer, so or QA guy who are absolutely testing the system the same way test the code, original code, like as someone is trying to do it. So then it verifies and give a percentage out of it. So the code line which how much you written. So okay, did you call all the lines and did you cover all the scenarios? So then we're gonna give a coverage of them and then say that okay, 100%, 70% something is covered. So whatever the coverages that we do for a class, so minimum at least 75% is required. For example, in this org you see, if you go to test, so there's no code coverage at all. Look at this. So many classes we have written. So there's no code coverage. This these many
So
classes.
0% means there's no core coverage, huh?
I mean, yeah, for there's no Apex class has any associate test class. So that's the reason
Okay.
everywhere it is zero. And look at these lines are very simple. Student constructor, if I read, it's just a four
Mhm.
line, but that line is not covered. Sample controller, 9 lines we have. No code coverage control. So this we have so many classes, but none of the classes been covered with. If this overall code coverage is 75% above, then it's good to deploy the snippets or the deploy the codes or Apex classes. Or individually, if you want to deploy the only the account batch Apex, okay, what is the percentage of this Apex? So they should be at least 75% above. Only then you can push the code from one node to another, or you can push it here, however it is from one node to another, or you can push it in sandboxes. But when it goes to the production, that time it must have 70% above. What if it's sometimes 65%, 70%, just 5% is missing? What happens? At that time, your overall code coverage, if it is high, let's say 90 percentage, so it can match up your 65 percentage code. Getting? You are sending 10 classes. In one of the 10 classes, 65% is one class we have. Um, so your overall code coverage in the production is the 90 percentage. So your 65% of other nine classes, if you compare, so the cumulative they will take it up. And the production or already the existing code coverage, their cumulative is 90% something. So it don't make a noise. It's simply uploads the content to their system because your overall code coverage is 90 plus there. So that's the reason sometimes it don't takes a big risk there. But if you wish one individual class with a 65%, then it's a crazy thing that says, okay, pass, you are having a less number of code coverage, please do it. You getting the point?
Yeah.
Okay, before starting something on the test class, we will do a few best practices. Hey, if I say this is the 10 lines of code, what is the best practice to cover the code or something the Salesforce tomorrow they don't come up or by doing a code review. See, code review can be done by multiple companies. Um, so you write a program and you give to the client, and the client expects that okay, are these guys have written the good amount of code, or who can validate this? So there will be for a code reviewing only of your logic could be some XYZ or could be assigned to you, or XYZ company can be assigned to you to check or invalidate against your code logic. So why do they do this? Because so we develop and we run away, and then someone has to take this to a production support, and thereafter something goes wrong. So it shouldn't be like a rewritten logic. We need not to rewrite from the beginning again because of the logic is not correct. So that's the reason always the people does a code review. The code review is maybe coming from the client only, where they tested the code whatever we have written, and we have to take an approval from uh, the client, or sometimes these guys clients can give to directly to Salesforce. Now Salesforce, any one guy would have come as a consultant and they would review the code. This also can happen, and that guy would give a suggestion or maybe frank statements what it is correct and what is wrong, why this is used, why point click should be implemented, why this guy written code. So a couple of them can be added here. You getting?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's start with the a few, I mean, very important points. Let's note it down. So in terms of what do you say? So those are used for the best practices. Always we have to remember the key points. So let me come here. So I think we have exposed the service, post, get request, all we did. So just sandbox. Okay. So this something is different. So test class for the basic integration, all that we're gonna do it. So now let's talk about test class implementation and their best practices. So what is the point number one we have to talk? See these best practices, if you go Google, you will get bunch of them. Really, I'm saying if you go to Google, say that give me a testing best practices, they will give bunch of them. So even in trailers also will get this. So I mean, for understanding or talking about this, I think we have to make sure some statement this which we are following is yes, we have to do this. So while talking about this, that is what I want to say. What is the best practices for talk? The first point itself indicates, hey, at least we need to have 75% plus code coverage is one of the important thing. Now, how many lines? First thing is let's talk. How many lines your Apex class is? For example, see um, over here. So let's come from the basic class. Let's see what is the student control is doing. Okay, student control is a class we have, and they just simply have display method, and they have another method called as a constructor they have, and yeah, the single log constructor, no argument constructor, one argument constructor. So simply they have like this. Okay, now how many lines of code we have? So we say it's a 4 line of code. Hey, are you crazy? I can see so many lines of code, and but your commented line I can see so many. Why only four has been considered here? So they consider only the important things. Let's say, for example, this method, a variable one, and a constructor has again one variable here. That's it. So if you see one, two, three, and this is a four. System.debug is not considered to be a line of code. You see? So when you want to cover this line or cover this Apex class, only 4 lines we have. So that's the reason they returns 0 out of 4, which sales was detected that okay, this having a 4 line of valid code. So how many lines of your Apex class is, and how much the code coverage covered. So we need to go line by line and make sure uh, the original class covered. See, expectation is just giving that, hey, you covered all the line. I'm expecting that 100 lines should be covered. Sorry, 100% should be covered. Sorry. Something, the code logic or some complex process that you have, something gonna do it. So at least 75 above to deploy. So this is a relaxation they're given, at least 75% above you have to have. Now, the one problem is if you all have 75%, 76%, something like this, you deploy to a production. So then what happens? Your overall code coverage of your org would be somewhere around 75, 70, something like that you have. Now they're trying to deploy the 10 classes. And even the 10 class, again, they have somewhere an average of 70, 73, sorry, 75, 76, something like that you have. One of the classes having 75 percentage. Yeah. So to increase the 1%, that's something you felt that there's an issue. But if you have overall code coverage at least like a little something like 80, 85, 90, so it can accommodate your changes. Okay, it's okay. One simple class which is 74. Uh, if you do overall cumulative of all these 85 percentage, that don't be matters. So of course they should have at least 75 percentage of code coverage. So you are around 85 percentage. So they can accept you. But your overall code coverage itself is not 75, and they are in a margin state. And the code which you're trying to deploy, and one among them have they are 1 or 2% is missing. So they would say, boss, I can only have the cumulative 75 plus, but how can I help you out? So again, they will fail there. So having seen code coverage error is getting what I'm trying to say here. So do not always focus on this. Salesforce expects that in any interview questions or in a trailer, PD1 or admin questions, you will get this. So what is the Salesforce expectation of the Apex Cloud code coverage should be? 100%, 70% is above. So they say it. You should say is the expectation is always 100%. With a what minimum, at least you can deploy the code if they ask. Okay, at least 70% above. So this is a very frequent questions which is asked across the interviews, or can come to what do you say platform questions for certification exams. So now let's say you are in so many methods. We see constructors. Let's come to a batch epics. So method one, not this. So batch epics always will have three. What is it? Start, execute, all stuff. We'll come to different one method. Look at this. So do get and do post, two different methods we have. So the same way, I cannot have one test class, one method to cover this both. So what I do is even I try to write two methods, three methods, four methods. So how many number of methods you write, we don't care. For each every method or every positive and negative scenario, have a good thing is to have different methods. Have unit tests for each methods and add few more methods in test class to cover positive and negative scenario. So what we expect is we have to have more number of positive and negative scenarios. So why we say that the positive and negative? If you do that positive and negative, all possible conditions, your code will be 100% for sure. Let's say you written a try catch. Try is what positive scenario. Something you raise an exception only, then go to exception catch. So if you write a positive scenario, all your try is covered. If you write a negative scenario in a different method, then okay, what the system assumes is each and every method you run, it assumes that okay, now this particular method, the whole logic runs. The next negative method, okay, now with the help of this negative method, the whole logic runs. So they're running a different transaction for each every method. I mean, overall one transaction only, but they are splitting up into different methods. So that way, it gives you coverage of positive and negative. So we would have written a try catch here. So try block also covered and the catch block also covered, because generally catch block won't it covers. Why? Because some exceptions if would have raised only then it comes to the catch exception. If the exception is not raised, you cannot go there. So such exceptions to arise from the test coverage also would be a challenging one. So we have to make something that the system should fail such a way that your exception has to be created. So that is something that negative scenario tested. So always in a test class, you should have a negative and sorry, positive and negative scenario to test. So that will eventually cover your code to be 100%. So this is another valid important point. So why we are taking a no, test class so seriously is without this you can't go to production. If I say, then it's crucially important. So you might have developed the logic, UI, everything you have been passed with, but without a code coverage, you cannot move one step ahead to production. So it's so damn important. Without that, we cannot move next step. And few things we have to consider while doing this. Salesforce or someone expects that hey, if you are doing a test class, you have to have this ABC. You have to follow the guidelines. Okay. Now we write hundreds of system.debug. So test class won't consider for system.debug. I said you system.debug this test class won't cover. I mean they would not even consider for it. So test class won't consider the system.debug, and since it's not counted under the code coverage. Okay. So what other points we can talk about is um, so you should see that a test class I can also fail before you develop or deploy to the production or maybe to the next hour. Please execute or please run the test. Please run the test class and check all the test class methods shouldn't fail. So you written a test classes and then you have a couple of methods that positive negative scenarios. So all the methods are passing and one method is failing. The failed test class you cannot push to the production or to the log. So that time, so try to have this all issues. Make sure your test class having the percentage of pass and then all the methods under their test class methods are passing. It's very important. So now test class, test class we always always create a dummy data. So you can't play with the original production data. So always you have to play with the dummy data. Something you are creating a record and then you're testing and then you're deleting the record, right? The same way, even the original test class of Apex, they try to create some dummy data on the premise of the testing, and then so they delete the record or flush the data after the test class has been run through. Is getting so we won't use the original data. Of course, there is an option to use the original data also, but however, from our test classes, whatever you do, try to insert, record, delete. So it won't impact to the production or sorry, it won't impact to the original org of the work class we have been having a records. So let's say you have 100 records you have in your production and your test class you are running in. So which tries to access the program production 1000 dogs. So they are in read mode. So we can't try to do one delete the record. So test class. So whatever the operations that you do, DML operations, so that won't impact the original log. And from a test class, whatever we create a dummy data, it flushes after the transaction is done. So test class will always create dummy data and flushes after the transaction overs. So why we have to create the dummy data and why we have to flesh it out if you see. So we are creating some test against some original class and we are verifying that everything is done. Let's say you're inserting a bulk record, you're deleting the bulk record. How do we do it? So we need to have some sample set of data to test it against it. If any tester is also doing so, they will try to create a records and only they perform it. And we also create some record and then see whether the value is populated, whether the record is deleted. We are doing something like UI based testing. How do a system does? Same way, you're creating a record and deleting a record. And after the testing is whatever you do it, we delete the record because it's just a simple test we have created. And that no one has any valid information there. So we delete them, right? The same way, test class also creates a dummy data and flushes after the transaction gets over. Sometimes our test class may have an access to original data too, but they are in read-only mode. So something that I think they're not sales is not recommending this. Under the test, we have this annotations. Under this, we keep it as see all data is equal to true. So when I give this statement see all data is equal to true, so this indicates accessing the original data of the org. But this is not recommended unless it's important. Is of course in Salesforce we have to use somewhere CL data is equal to true. Why? Because you don't get the data where they don't allow you to create a data. So that time we have to use the existing systems data. Like for example, price book entry on products. So we have price book entry. For this particular price book entry, so we can't try to insert the record here. So that time we have to access CL data is equal to true. So what you do is the particular method what we're trying to access above that you can put a CL data is equal to true. Not for all the overall class you shouldn't do it. So where you require only to that particular method you put it. So do not do for the above the class name. So if you put an above the class name, overall the classes in that any methods it can access the production data or origin data. So if you put under the above a method, like how we do put an annotation, right? So if you put that way, only that particular method can have an access. So we'll see them. So so when I say about positive and negative test here somewhere, cover the try catch block too. Any test you do it, so make sure you're trying to do it for bulk records. So test is not always for a single record, right? So you have written so many systems, or you're trying to access the restaurant, or you're trying to insert the distance between these two guys. Who's that from you and to the restaurant? You're talking always about one record. What if I give 1,000 records and for all the 1,000 records you investigate so their particular record and their restaurant record and update the 1,000 record there. So test against the bulk data. So what if you give a bulk data, thousands of records, still your system is stable to take it off. Test against um, How do you say that still it can work fine? So if you handle the list and proper of handling them, outside the for loop, adding the records or updating the records, so then you don't have a problem. So what if you put 1,000 records and then inside your for loop you have written a DML statement? It can fail, right? So we don't know that. So that's the reason we wanted to give a bunch of record there and we wanted to test it out. Okay. The seventh point, very important, is each and every test class annotated with the rate is test. So whenever above the class, um, above the class name, something like this, of the rate is test, and then we have private um, class, and then we have test. So some people prefix this at the last as a test. It's all you wish, where you write it. So ABC's version class, like say for example, student, we have right student student controller. For that student controller, you return a test class. So at the last, you should have a test annotated. So for different companies, they have followed the different logic. So some people gives underscore here at the last, or some people they don't give it. But at least they put a test at the last. So the moment you join the company, so you have to see how the test coverage they've written. So are they writing any logic class plus under that they're happening with test. Why we do this? Because this easily understands that okay for this class you have written a test class. It is very easy catchy to understand about this. Okay, for the original Apex class you have a test class associated to it. This is easy way of identifying. Okay, test class has been written for this. Okay, other few important points I would talk is so 10 points I want to talk. Eighth point is um, use test utilities. So what is this? Use test utilities. Test utilities indicates where you're trying to create a data. Do not create the data for each every class the same account creations or account creation. If you see that this is a common thing where you create data, do not create every time. I mean, on every test classes you create some data. So it is a tedious thing where you often have to create it for each and every class. Okay. So the meaning of that, what is it going to be an impact? Of course, I'm creating it's working fine. So what if tomorrow you are adding a two fields which is a required field in your Apex class? Okay. And you made two fields as a required field in your no, configuration. So you went on to the field you made in the field level only you made as required. That means so it is damn required. You cannot skip them out. If you're doing from a layout, page layout, you're going to make them as required. Still, only when we're going to the layout, we consider that to be required. From otherwise, from the outside, doing a backend system, that is not required actually. So if you mark a UI, then only at UI they are required. But if you go to the field configuration, object manager, and then respective object, you enter into the fields, and in the fields there is something required checkbox. If you do there, checked, so that is absolutely required. You can't miss them out. So like that two fields, someone is like making them as required. Now you run a test class. In the test class, that two fields are not added because that is not a required field. You're not even considered to be, inserting that record. What happens? So that particular test method will fail. Because you are didn't include your required fields data there. So it says the test class says required field is missing. Of course, right? In the UI also, if you miss a required field, you're trying to save. It says required field is missing. Same way, your original test data is also on the classes whatever you created. So even they fail. So what happens is, and you run a 10 Apex different classes for different test classes. All the 10 different classes also fail. Why? Because all they're expecting for the required fields. So what I'm saying is one common place if you have a test creation and then you're utilizing always. So changing to that particular only for the test utility, it could be reused in multiple places wherever they have used it. So we don't create test data as each and every class where we say utility, you created data there and you're utilizing in your test classes. So that way, so changing to this utilities class, it's more than enough if you feel. Okay, do it one place. Whoever is used this particular logic to create a record, so they don't have any issues because you change the place where you want to be doing it. And the people all other are they are referencing this particular utility class. So you should not have any issues there. So do not create the raw data in each and every test classes. When something goes wrong or you're having a change in your data model, like creating a field or deleting a field, so that should not impact your test class. Is making getting this point? Is getting this? Even there. Is anyone there in the meeting?
Sorry?
No, I was asking that you got this point
Yeah, yeah.
because no one like answered, so I didn't thought that okay. So there. So test utilities you need to have. We call test list. It will be a test utility class or test factory. You can hear a bunch of different names in your when you go to project. So wrap wrap up the code logic where the DML changes happens. So there are two methods we have: test dot start test and stop test. So this code logic, I mean, where we wanted to wrap up this is wherever you have DML changes you have or DML executions that you do it. Mm. So you have to cover there. Why? Because where original logic or DML is happening. See, these two things we are increasing the governor limits. It increases the governor limits. What do you mean by this governor limits? So let's say you can insert 1,000 record. You're saying or you're saying that you wanted to insert 11,000 record, but oral transaction can insert only 10,000 record. So one more 1,000 record you can't insert it. In one single transaction you cannot do it. But if you have a start test and stop test, so you can increase the governor limit share. How? You are wrapping up, for example, so the oral test class is running in a single transaction. The oral test class is running in a single transaction with the different test methods. Now each and every test method is running, inserting 7,000. So overall, for that particular method, if you don't wrap up the test dot start test and stop test, so 7,000 record is already inserted. Another test method is also inserting 7,000 record. It will fire there only an issue. Because what is this 7 plus 7, 14,000 record inserting it? It exceeded the limit, so I'm failing. So what you have to do is, if you can wrap up with the test dot start test and stop test, wherever you're trying to do insert and check the system. So after the next method, when you start, again it starts with a refresh of 0. It what is it? What is a good term for this? Okay, they restart again with the 0. They restart the count with the 0. So maybe first method, so you're inserting 7,000 record. Second method, again you're inserting 6,000 record. Look at here. If you don't have a test.start test and stop test covered here in this method, if no, um, okay, if not used, so then it will fail here. Why? Because in the first method, you are inserting some 7,000 record and you're testing the bulk test there. Maximum again, according to the logic, if you don't use this, what assumes this limit 3,000. If you don't use this, you insert 7,000 record, only still 3,000 record is pending. The next instant method you are taking 1,000 6,000 records, it will fail because limit exceeded. Yes, limit exceeded. Okay, this is an exception that which gets as limit exceeded because of the transaction 10,000 record above you are inserting in one go, so it cannot do it. But whereas if you do wrap up with the test.start test and stop test with the within the insert method wherever you're trying to do, so then again the government limit resets to 0. Again here 6,000 record you insert. So again you have another method to do it. So again it resets to 0. Why? You are wrapping up with start test and stop test. So that increases the government limits. Not only I'm talking about this record insertion, it talks about the circle statement. You're querying a record. You can query up to 15,000 record in a set. What if you're querying 52,000 record? So what your test data you're inserting is more than 50,000 records. So to all to consider this, so you have to always have wherever the DML logic that you're performing of where the execute original thing happens. So you have to wrap up them with the test start and stop test for sure. And if you create some bulk 1,000, 7,000, 6,000 records, you need not to worry. That is recommend. And yeah, the 10th point I want to talk is even trigger classes also should have the test coverages. So you should do that. Mm, So so make sure you comment each test method what you are trying to cover. So like for example, we write a test case, right? In the test case, we say that, hey, go to this object, go to this record, create a record, and other record should populate with this value. And then if the after creation of the record, if it populated well, so then your test cases pass. Something we do, right? So you're also writing a test method to do same activity like how a tester is doing. So make sure whatever the logic that you're going to create a record and test again the same system, you also write a comment on each every method on the test class method above, so that okay, this particular method is doing this xyz activity, another guy can easily understand it. So have some comments on the test cases, test case method, whatever you use it. I think if you all follow this, it is well and good. So sometimes we use test utils, sometimes we try to use what do you call test setup. So where you try to create a record in one method, then cells was in particular class and other methods are using it. So test util is something that it is universal. Once you create, you can access across the org. So one more we have called as upgrade test setup. So you creating a test data only for that particular class, and other methods can use them. Each and every method you're not creating data. So in a one particular class you create data, other methods are using it. It's just something like private, public, and global. For test utilities, what I say is it's just like global. Once you create, you use across. Other test setup, what I say, it is like public. Of course, within that method, whatever you write, they can use it. If you go to each and individual method, then they are too much private. So they another method cannot access that particular test data what you created it. So we'll see them, but majority will focus on all other areas whether what you want to do it. Sometimes your test classes should be private. Um, points to be noted. Points to be noted. What is this? Private uh, access modifier. for the class and the methods. So why the test class should be private? Because we don't want, so this particular test class can be used by another guys. You can't use the test class like this to another guys. So one particular class and one test class associated with that. That's more than enough. You know, student control is a class you have, original class. For that one test class is enough. If the original class variables are private, so make sure you on it other test visible. Getting? So your original class you in the student control you written. So one particular variable you made as private, and you want to cover that line. But since they are made as private, test class cannot see that record. Why? Because private means it's access only to that particular class. Outside the people they cannot access it. So above that particular variable, whatever you declared, you should mention that at the test visible. So when a test class runs, they will get to know, okay, this is the variable that where test class has to be viewed about, because it is made as private where test class can access them. You're just opening it only for the test class. Okay, so I think here points to the number also. Point one, two, and write as many test methods to cover the original class. So this always we say the statement, and what is the points? Okay, X private access original class should be private and the test. Okay, if you want to run, if you want to um, bypass bypass original class snippet, somewhere some logic you want to snip, no, bypass them. So what you have to can do is you can say uh, test dot is running. You can use this function whenever test dot is running. So only for that particular time in your original class that logic would run. You can wrap up some code there. Okay? If test dot running means that whenever the original test class is running, so whatever the snippet that you written, only them, I mean only that will try execute in that particular logic. So I'll tell you what is that original test class is dot running is run test means about. So in your original private in original Apex class, you wanted to bypass that 2-3 lines. Why? Because that 2-3 lines is something read only data. You can't do anything there. So when while you're trying to test against the, maybe while you're trying against the UI, you won't see that changes because they've already skipped out those values what to be executed and what to be tested from Salesforce from the UI perspective. Now you have testing from you're manually taking a test class and you're writing it, and those 4 lines are read only mode record. You can't do any change in that. For example, auto number. Can you modify the auto number? So you can't do it, right? So test dot is running your test you're saying, and only a particular that in particular logic you're writing some here. And you're saying that when original class comes in, so you are not worrying about uh, the original class to run in that particular snippet. So then we use test dot is running test. And you don't want it to run them, so you can mark this, at the you can negate this. Like for example, if not test dot is running, then do this. If test dot running test, you skip this. Something like that we can use the statements. I think we covered majority of points. Let's quickly cover the test classes now. Why? Because um, whenever we write the points of integrations, we may use mock class, use mock classes for integrations. Why? You can't do a real-time test about the call which is happening. You have to fake the mock, fake the response which you're getting it. Is getting. So we can't assume, we can't really hit, test class cannot hit the real-time data to some third party and get it. So, but we have to fake the response. This is how the response is coming from that guy. And using the response, you play with this. So use the mock classes for integration. Apex class with fake response. With fake response, cover the original code. So that way, an integration can have 5, 6 mock classes, also they can have it. So these are the few points to be noted, which is like something on the experience or something you will get it. So need not to worry. But these 10 points are, there's still more 10 points would be there. Please go to the websites and then see them. But absolutely, these are very important at high level. I think mostly we covered all. So test util for in every class where we say this is global, and you may have at the rate test setup. This point also for only that particular class. The data is accessible. Ready? So we would be using this. We would be clubbing the utilities class into test setup, and then we would be using it. So even that will happen. But I think overall the test class and what the coverage for even for the integrations that all we mentioned. Now from now we'll try. It will take another 45 minutes to cover this. We'll go quickly to each and every class and cover up an inclusive code coverage percentage. Okay, so the first thing is student constructor. Simple one. We would go quickly create new Apex test. And so we don't have any data to create here. We have to simply call the method, right? How do we run this test class? How do we run this class? Firstly, we do a control E student controller. If I want to call this method, display, how do I call it? It's a void method, non-static method. How do I call them? Look at this. Already we have executed the thing. Student constructor, SB go to new constructor, and so they are having one argument value to pass. What is there here? So student constructor, we have to pass this method if you think, or pass the value if you think. See, constructor, new constructor, it's a one argument which you're passing. So we're passing Albert here. So if you do this, a constructor value is passing. What is that? AB SB dot display. SB dot display is this method. So why we need to have the other SB here is with the help of object instance only, we can call this method. Correct, right? Because it's not a static method. If static method, you can call class name dot method name. And of course, with the help of the class variables only, we can call them. So they don't have a single argument constructor here. If you want, of course, you can use them because they have explicitly you have mentioned it. If you don't specify this, then along with this only you can always specify. Why? Because you have defined it here. So when you, I said already, I think in the constructors are always been for every class it is present, unless if you disturb their original context. So then you have to define your own constructor like this within a loop. It's okay, you should have it. So now let's say I'm gonna call this. So the moment I call this, so you have called this, and you've also called. You have called this now because you passed a value here. Something would have set here, and also you have called the display. Correct? See, hello, it's non-static. Where is it? Hello, it's non-static. And what is student name? How do we got to the student name? There's a variable here. Now we'll make this also private and we'll play it here. Let's see. I'm making this private. That means other guys can access this. For this, we'll add it. So I'm making this as a private variable. No one can access this. Only for this particular class, this is private. Okay. Still, it will work. It looks good. No issues with this. Student is Albert. How we got to know Albert? Because we passed a constructor. This is the student name we spent, and whatever the name we passed here, so we have assigned this here. So that's the reason. The value has been assigned here, and when the display is called, you are calling the class name of the variable whatever you've been passed. I think overall we have used, right? So to cover this is the important thing that we have to do it. What is that? So simple things we have called it, right? Now I'm gonna write a test class. Look at this for the same. How you are executing numbers, you're doing a testing to execute this code. The same way we're doing in test method, test class also. So actually, test class is the one way directly you can test it, or you have a original Windows. What is that? Apex window or execute numbers window. You're testing the record from there. So two ways we have to test it offline uh, without having a UI. Is one is test class and one is your execute anonymous. In execute anonymous, you're testing it and you're seeing the results instantly. The same way you can have a test class. They also doing against the respective original logic, whatever written, and I'm doing the same there also. Student controller test, student constructor test. No class is there. I said it should be private. So if I do a private save, will it work? So it throws an error. Why? Because they don't accept the private as to be now as access modifier. But if you do at the rate is test, they would accept you. Why? Because test classes they accept that they should be private. See, they got saved it. Now again, I want to call this particular constructor to pass this original class. So where I need to have a method also to cover up this, right? At the rate is test. On every method you mention this, the rate is test, private. All the test method should be static void. Public, private, static void. What is the test method that we're covering? Check student name. So this is a test name. I'm writing it. Check student name. So this is a test method that we're writing here, and we're trying to call this. And like this. So by doing this, you're trying to call the student constructor, and you're passing the alphabet. And let's see what happens. I'm going to
So why
run
you
this.
have given each test twice there?
So you're saying that each test is originally for the overall class, and every method that you have to annotate with the other is test.
Oh, okay. It won't inherit like from the class, same heap, all the.
This annotation is mentioning that this is a test
Yeah,
case.
yeah.
And this annotation is for every test method. We have to saying that this is a particular test method because we can
Oh,
have a normal method also here.
okay, okay.
We can have ABC method here, and that method cannot be annotated with the other rate because it's a normal method where
Okay,
you're utilizing this method for this test class, whatever you're doing it. But so that's the reason they are putting at the rate is test for every method. So earlier we
okay.
had a method something like this: private, static, void, something like this. Test method, something keyword we had test method. So now Salesforce to remove this, and they are asking us to have at the rate is test and have this method. So that's the current expectations of every people should have it. Okay. So two ways of mentioning a test method we had. One is we have a keyword called test method, or we have a annotate that method with at the rate test is test. So Salesforce now recommending that okay, this is the best one to have it. So we are all following the same. So I will just run the test. Let's see. So we run the test. Look at this. So student constructed test. This particular test run. Check student name run, and executed. But where the code coverage happened? Code didn't cover at all. What is the reason that code didn't cover? So I feel that you are trying to call a name, so that name has to be printed. Even this particular value is not passed. Maybe it's because of private. I don't know. So however, we have to set the name to the student, only then it will work. At the rate test visible. To the original Apex class, I'm modifying this. So will this make sense? And we change. Let's see. Look at this, 70% covered. Method constructor. You didn't call an empty constructor, so that's the reason this didn't cover. See, out of the 4 lines, you covered this line, and this line. But the one more thing is student constructor didn't cover. So that's the reason it didn't give you. It's full percentage. Getting? So what you have to do is come back here and you have to call that empty constructor. Okay, student constructor. That's it. Look at this now 100%. Since this 4 lines are covered, look at this, the overall code coverage of this org is really increased to 1%. Because assume in this in this org we have so many number of lines of code. See 17, 27, 67, so many number of lines of code we have. And out of this only 4 lines covered, and they are cumulative, all that it says how many lines? It says 1% that we have code so far.
But we did only positive testing, right? What about negative testing then?
I mean, in this negative testing, we don't have anything. Negative testing is
Yeah.
indicates about something which will something where we have a try catch, and the try one we are executing, and then somehow we have to fail the try, and then we have to get to catch. So
Okay.
when the lot of we have scenarios we have here, we would have a negative and positive testing more side. We will have it. So I'm just starting with the basic class so that
Okay. Got it.
we
Got it.
we are getting good with the okay test class how it is. Because we have to cover up to integration classes. So how do we get used to this with the basic class? Let's start. I think this is a simple dummy class which is written, hey, call a constructor, hey, I have this guy. Okay, good enough. So where I made this guy as a particular variable as a private, and whatever you do, you have been invoked and doing it all, it went to zero. Why? Because this particular variable, what you're passing, and it's been dependent in so many places. So firstly, the variable itself is not visible to test class. So what it assumes is such variable is not there. So it never goes to value to here, or say here, and assigns a value to this particular guy. Why? Because this is not visible. So that's the reason it didn't cover at all. So the moment we made that particular variable as a visible to only for test classes, so it started using it and given a code coverage of 100%. So now if you go see this and then click on the double click on it, you will get to know, okay, now everywhere it is covered. And while doing it, you can see that the system on debug all is not covered. Why? Because they are not considered. Only which are important things are considered. Okay. So next is sample controller where they have 9 lines. What they're doing here. So are they doing anything with the data? Okay. So I always recommend that, okay, if you have a method, one method, test class method, so try to execute with that one method to one method. One to one you do it. Why? Because each and every test method, your logic is huge, then one logic, one method you will use it. So like another logic, another method you use it. So currently these are all the one single statement. We can cover up all them in one simple method only. But let's see how to cover up this because we say positive scenario. Sample controller. I want to write a new another test class. Sample controller test. Look at this. Always annotate the sorry. I append this the name with test. Every time when you make it, it should be private here, and you should make this as at the rate test. So look at guys. There's no change in here. Look at this. After it make a change. So the moment I save the record, you can see a run button comes in picture here. Look at this. Why? Because when you have a test, unthreaded, and then there is each test. So you run test button will automatically come here. All right, no problem. So at the rate is test we have. So what we're going to do it on the sample constructor, sample controllers. To run constructor is done. Sample controller what we have. So they have a method called display username. It's a simply non-static method. Static method. There are a couple of them we have here. Okay. At the rate is test. Static void. So which method is the first one we're going to cover now? Display username, right? So I'm gonna say that check display username. So enter this, you're trying to do some activity, which is something like you're going class name. It's a non-static method. So I have to instantiate a variable here, and then with the help of the variable, I'm trying to call that. This is how we are doing it in the exit environment, right? So we are using these methods and calling them. Correct, right? If you want to check that particular method how it is working, this is how we are written exit environment, right? See, always I write this snippet and check it out. Okay, to call a method like this directly, very beginning class in developer class, where this class name ab is equal to do, and then we ab dot display username we do. So then in this class sample controller, this particular method would run, which is that display username. That is how we tested. So if I do run this, I get this username dot debug, right? Now look at this. Okay, so I'm gonna do a run test here. So the moment I do a run test, your logic, whatever you're calling, it would call the original Apex class and then try to execute again that. Let's see. You have to see the log, guys, whatever we are seeing here, running here. So this is a log got generated. In the log, you can see the results. See username batch33. So you call that particular method, it printed the user. What is it? User info dot get name means it's saying that batch 33 is the batch. Because the R name it says batch 33. That's the reason it printed like that. Batch 33 is the R name, username is this. The value which we have been appended here. Username this hyphen. User dot get name is batch 33. So always your original test classes runs against your original class, and you're calling this method means it'll executely run absolutely like how you're creating a record and you're testing it, right? The same it happens. Now this test class is run against this particular method, so it executed and print the same what we wanted it. So they run like real, but no test data has been actually really created or really deleted. So we just take some dummy data and then we cook up it and then we see, okay, the results are fine. But they try to run as if as 100% that really how our logic is running. How do we create? What is the process happens? Everything like in real it happens. So that's how we call this particular class and method name. We try to execute the real value of it. So if you have some insert method here, it would have been inserted record there. And post this transaction is complete, you cannot go test that record whether whatever that you inserted in this because they purge the data. So the moment transaction get over. So this all we're doing is testing against the system. Now let's see the controller only one this particular method we covered and then other guys we didn't call it all. So let's go to test and see they are covered 22% here. What is this indicates? See only you call this particular variable class and then a method you called it. That's all. Two lanes something covered and other lanes are not covered. With this 22 coverage, you cannot take it to next to production, right? So that's the reason it didn't cover at all. So out of 9 lanes, only 2 lanes got covered, it's saying. So we have to increase this coverage. How? So go make sure your test classes haven't covered up all this. So only display username, I got it. This public static void display get username. Okay, static username. See, I can write a separate method like this for each and every method. If you have different this is good enough. Now that means you're trying to check against each guys. So this is also good practice. So we're calling it's a static method and it's a display static username as a method name we have. So we don't use this, instead directly we call. Okay. So this is more than enough. So check display. See, now if I run, so that particular method will call because you calling class name dot method name on that particular method got executed. Always your test, each and every method is passing or not, you can see here. Check display static username. So this particular method it got passed under this class, and then again this top one is got passed. Something is failing here. It'll tell you this method is passed and this method is failed. So in this particular controller. So that way you will easily get to know. So each method that whatever rating is covering or not under this particular class. Now we'll see the code coverage percentage also here. 33, it increased to 33 because one line got covered. So what is that one line if you see? Static username. Is any questions here? No
Not
questions.
good.
Okay. So let me cover all of them now. So we have two more methods. So get user email, right? So get user email, what they're doing is, okay, it's a string method. See, all them in one method only you can do and put it everything. So I'm saying that, okay, multiple methods. So if you have, so you're covering each and every method of the original class. So it's more best practice that we are holding here. Okay. So what are the method that we have? Get user email, get user static email. Oh, this is a non-static and this is static. Okay. If you're doing original test, you can check, say, check display username. You can write it as positive, something like this. And then for the same kind of negative also. In terms of if you're decrypting some data and you're playing with it. So best thing I told is always you need to have comments, right? So you can mention the comments from here only. So what I say is, let's see, test user can get username of the org. Yes, of course, no, it's printed by 33. Same way, we have multiple methods to have here. Get user static email is the one which we have been done with this particular method. And this method is display static username is not the one which we're dealing with. So we are dealing with string method, which is a get user email. And this non-static method, I think we have to invoke the class. And call this. Okay. So this is a non-static method. I've called non-static way. The static method, I'm sorry, calling it a static method way. All that I'm doing it. So test the user can get the username of the org. This is absolutely working. So that is what the expectation there. And test the user can get Same username with static method. So the same data doesn't matter. Just we're trying to print it with the static or non-static. But ideally the result is just to get the username. So we are trying to use this non-static, static is all for our learning purpose. Get the user email here. Static. So every test method that whatever you put, you have a original case of what it is doing. So this will be easy for anyone to test it out. So tomorrow someone comes to the class, okay, this guy is doing this all the test, okay, good. So that way we understand a test class more easy. And what we're trying to do testing of that original logic via through UI, so we can get them the same here. So basically you're writing a test case here and then you're trying to execute the same. So this is more good enough. So now it increased to 4% great. And in other classes we have is 100% interest. So we have, if we cover like these all the lines, so then our code coverage would be going up. So it is good for us to deploy to the next production node. Now the logic which I run this test test, right? So you can go to the logs, you can check the latest what we have run. So if you run overall this particular class, so they would have given all these results here. See two places you have this debug statement in this controller. One is at line 23. Or did I close it? Okay. So sample controller. Line number 29, you have one debug statement. Line number 23, one debug statement. That's all. No other places you have this. Guys, you see this? Line number 9 it printed, line number 23 it printed. So it works like actually the original way that how we call and test and then all the methods executes, but they don't throw in anything in the real time. But all we check it whether the system is working as expected. So you run a test class, you saw the coverage there 100%. If it is 100% coverage, your what is like execution happened in your original class you can see, but just debugging the log. So you got wherever you put a statement of debug, you got this. Any questions till now?
No.
Okay. So what else next we can take? These are very good. Content parent shell class. So parent class, shell class, they're trying to cover up. Let's see them also. So they are trying to have the querying a record and then giving you. So what if I'm in a child class and I'm trying to cover both the guys? This also is possible. So you are in contact parent class, right? I'm in a child class. Let's open a child class also. Open contact child class. Okay. So let's do something here. We will try to cover the child class, and that eventually you're calling the parent class. Even both the class should get covered. Let's see. So I'm gonna write this class for What is the method that we have? Past contact. We want this to be test method. Okay. So we're good. Our pattern is built right now. So what this particular class is doing? Past contact method. Hmm. So instantiate the class. Should try to run the past contact method. The past contact method takes a list of records to process. So where you have a list of contact records to deal with. Now look at this contact records I have to query here. So contact record is something the original data we have it. In a test class, I said that you can't access the data. So where do you go for contact data now? Here we go with the first set of data, what we're trying to do with. Now, let's say you don't have a contact records. Your test method has to have a contact records. Only you can call them. Is getting you're trying. So I have another thought where if you say that okay, I have these many test classes, all would I be able to cover? So what I want to do is so the normal methods I've written and few other classes, all the classes I want to cover it here. So I want this make this art to be let's see 100% code coverage of this area whatever we want to have. So what I'll do is few class I'll do a self recording for myself and then write a test class and then post it here. So whenever you have time for other test classes, you can see them. The same way I'll go to each and every class and then explain. I'll try to do that. But so for integration class, I would say how do we create a mock class and I will do it. So tomorrow we can spend something on to integration class and then we just move on to the next. So otherwise, you few other test classes which we have here, I'll do a self-recording and then I'll send it out in a video. But this ideally we have to understand how we are writing a test class and how we're doing it. For more extension of this, you can watch another video where I would have posted for how I'm writing other test classes. You can see them. So now we'll try to cover this kind of component class. How we're doing with here we have a contact record. So now I would do right a normal approach. I would not get into very the best practice approach at the very beginning. So what is the problem I'll show you, and then we'll move on this all to best cases where we have a separate test method utilities where we call as a test setup. I'll get them later. Maybe in a self recording, if see you will be able to get them. But now I wanted to create some contact. See, you are running with the context of contact in the test class. I don't have any contact. So whatever you have in your hand, only then with that you can test it. In your hand is nothing here. There's no contact at all. To have that, what I should do is I should have the contact record and what these guys are all talking about. Contact, super contact. Okay. If you go to their parent class, so he's selecting the last name and he's querying with the last name. So then what I should do is I need to insert a record here and then only then I can process it. Okay, let's try to insert a record. So that too they're expecting list of accounts. So list of contacts. So okay, so list of contact they're expecting in this in what part of this process they're expecting contact has to be a list of records. Why? Because they're processing in a for loop. They have a contact list here. So all they're trying to do it. So what I want to do is I want to have a contact list. Con list is equal to new. So I'm just going to insert some dummy data here. Okay. And I'm saying that contact con is equal to new contact con dot last name is equal to some dummy data you're inserting here. And you're adding to the con list. So that means you're trying to add to the con list. So this is the first record. So like that you're inserting at least one more record thing. So here test record So this is basically a name, guys. So last name I'm just giving. So you can have whatever the name. You can give real name also. No issues. I'm just putting test contact too. So this should be contact one, one, and one. All were added into this list. And finally, we're inserting the list. Insert con list. So basically, data creation for the test class. So why? Because why we have to create data? Your original class is all expecting some data is yet to be present. If you just simply execute, they don't have any data, then what they will progress with? So you need to cook up something that okay, we have a data and we are dealing with. So always we need to move in a context something all we have it. So if you're moving in this context, yes, of course, if I have a contact record only, then I can play with this class. So that's the reason I'm just creating this contact record. Now what I'm going to do is this class name. So this class name dot what is that method name? Pass contact. I'm going to call now because the static method is right. Static non-static. It's a non-static method, so we don't care. It's okay. Contact class cc is equal to new contact class cc dot. Let's see. I don't know. I've just created some dummy data creation for the test class um, to pass the original class mini data. Let test data. So let's see now. Calling this a child class and then pass contact. Whether I'm in the child class right now, so would you be able to go get the parent class and do it? So let me try to run this test. So it passed the test. One method, whatever we had. And let's come to the child class and see. Child class passed 66 percentage. So why it passed 66? Of course, it got a contact now. It had a contact list records. Now let's go logs and check. And that's a nice thing. We got debug. So hello contact. I'm in child class. Okay, go ahead. So you created a contact, and then the contact had test record, contact, test record, two. All this we had. But what the original class is expecting? So they are checking the name to be Kalpana. I am trying to create with some other XYZ data. How it will pass inside? So that's reason got failed here. So our test class data, something like original class it should have. So the first record I'm expecting to have Kalpana here. Because they're saying that, hey, they can't dot last name, they ignore case, whatever the Kalpana they have. And only then you call this as something success. Or else you say that the record process doesn't have Kalpana, so we're not getting inside at all. Let's see. Now I have just entered the record with Kalpana. Any luck, we'll see that. So long it's saving. What's up, man? Control is it's already saved. Let me This see this contact class now covered with 100 percentage. Why? Contact parent class covered 100 percentage, and contact child class covered 100 percentage. How? Because we call the child class, we call the child class, where it is. So we call the child class, and we passed 2 or 3 records as the dummy data we passed here, and then one of the record which we hold as the Kalpana. If the Kalpana is matched, go to add to the con list, and then con list we printed as returning them. Else we're saying that the record is not processed. So we were into this since we passed into the Kalpana, right? There should be log to be printed for us. The logs goes here success. That statement also should be printed. Let's see then. See, hello, I'm in a contact. I'm in a child class. Where's that firstly? Hello, I'm in child class. So the next you have a pass contact where you all try to get record, right? So that has come inside, and then you check for the Kalpana. Yes, it found. So then it says logic goes here. Then you return it because it's found in if statement only. Now where do the super dot pass contact come from? So this goes to the parent class. So it went to the parent class, and there pass contact we had the query name we are giving Kalpana, and then we query the record. Yes, it found. So what your original class is doing, if you follow the same, so it can appear. So why did I write for a child class? Because in a child class you're trying to call super so that the parent class can also be covered. So by writing this way, you need not write any separate test for the parent. If they have too many functions, yes, you can write it. Otherwise, you see here. Now, so far 4 test classes we written, and that has the code coverage of 100.
So, but it didn't. It executed the second one. Like one we gave Kalpana, one is test
Yeah,
record contact.
it will have come to the next place where like, see if what is this original case is doing here. If Kalpana is found, it will be here. Else, it will go to here. No
Yeah, but we did you see that in the debug log? I didn't see that. So
process record does not have a Kalpana. Good question. Harm. This would be in the negative case where we try to print another method and we check it out. Let's write them. So this, let's say positive. Let's have same thing called to be for negative. See, to do negative testing also you need to have overall test data. Again, you have to recreate. That's the reason we have been saying that hey, it's not a good case. So very often that you get the same record. So you have test record here, you're recording this, pass contact. So pass contact. So I think why it will fail here is, let me check. See. I'll show you. I think it won't call, I think, I believe so. Why? Because so the moment you come here calling super.pass contact, so the super.pass contact it goes here. To pass contact will come here. The query, whatever you sent is this is the Kalpana you're sending it here as a name. Select last name from where. So this result is returning 0. Okay? When the result is returning 0, so the moment you come here, the record of this for loop itself is 0. So nothing it works out. Getting the point?
okay.
So I think this statement is not making sense here.
Yeah, it's
So
not
what?
going.
Yeah, it's not going. It's not even making sense. So that's the reason it is not even covered. The line lies like blue color indicating here. Whatever it is covered, it's been said there. Okay, now in order to cover that or not have a wrong value, see the problem here is you are expecting Kalpana to be printed here. Hmm. So I can do one thing. You should, in this case, you need not to say that the query name should be Kalpana here. So you're forcefully making that the value should be Kalpana here. So I would say a simple turn where I'm writing this contact. That's it. Now you can see them. Select last name from contact. You have inserted two records there, right? So those record will come in picture here, and these record would be returned. And the return record you are expecting to have. Hmm, now the return record you are expecting to have any records. So in the child class I've inserted. Um, so let's say this only one record you are inserting as a positive. The next method itself is a negative statement. You think. What we do is we'll take up this. Assume only one record you insert to the list and you're added Kalpana is which we require now required. So in a child class, what you're doing is if the record is Kalpana, add to the list and then make some this of this statement. If not else, you say that boss, this is not a we don't have Kalpana at all, so we don't have any records here. So how we are justifying this. Your past contact has been saying that if the record is holding up this, then we do it. In the past contact only what we did is in the parent class, we were query defaulting only Kalpana to have. Actually, I'm creating a number of records, but it's not matching. Only Kalpana based records you're querying it. So bad. So now I'm giving liberty to them. Hey, you can query any records, any number of records here, whichever you insert test data. So in original case of same. So that will this particular parent has only work for a Kalpana there. So what only Kalpana can have a contact. We can have this guys also, right? So in this case, this is a positive case. We are trying to have Kalpana here. Okay, perfect. The negative test, what you're doing is we are not giving Kalpana here. We're giving some other else record. So that you will come to else portion. So here only we start with the positive and negative. Let's try to run this now. I expect that two times you are not into the process record doesn't have Kalpana should come, and one time you have been successfully processed that should come. So what do you guess? Because in one of the record, so if I insert three contacts so far, in the one of the contact is having Kalpana, so logic success. In other two scenario where another scenario where I've inserted two records, and two record doesn't have Kalpana here. Correct, right? They have tested on something else. So let's come back here, and they have 100% here, and they have 100% here. Perfect. Coverage, we have coverage is good, and I have control log, and I come check here, and I check the statement, debug. Correct, right? So it says the process record doesn't have Kalpana test. The process record doesn't have Kalpana test record. See, the Kalpana is the text which I'm printing here, where I'm printing here. And actual name what is getting it is test record we're getting, and one more we have getting test record like this. Normal test, just test record contact two. Because that is what we did we feed it here, right? Test and test record contact two. In one of the record it got given Kalpana, so it is printing Kalpana Kalpana. Look at this. It got fail in one of the logic, it goes here success. Why it says success? You given the value as Kalpana, so it went to the logic, it figured out okay, log Kalpana is present in this one of these contact which you're processing in. So it says logic goes here. Or else all the two records gone here. So any questions here?
Okay.
So yeah, this is how you test a positive and negative. So we always want if logic also should execute, or else logic also should execute. So what small things we are saying is, so I just wanted to maybe I would have put like query, how do the like query would work? I would have given example there. So might be I would have specifically given Kalpana there. So this can be generic here, and we are passing creating records of generic. In our shell class, we are specific about hey, you need to have this value, or else we say this. This is good enough. So writing one test cases, we cover two classes wherever the link you have. So this is good. So now what disadvantage we have in this test class if you see, same test data, again I created here. To avoid this, what we do is we use utilities and setup data. So that I will try to write on my own, and then I will show you a demo of tomorrow. So what I've written, and I'll record a video also for that. And after I can record it, and then I'll put along with this video, so you can watch it up. So tomorrow, what is my focus is other test classes like integration service. We have no, so I'll write in front of you guys. So where we are, how do we are writing a mock class? How do you faking the response, like as if it is coming from the third party system, and are we able to cover as all the records? Because when you see here, um, so record expose service. So we are exposing a service like say do get. Someone has to invoke the service, right? Only then this all this will pass. So if someone is trying to invoke the service, they are pretty working fine. So then this particular expose service and method is absolutely can be real time exposed. If someone cannot pass or get inside this itself, so some original logic itself is having issue. How can I go to expose service to some people? So that is the reason. So this all we'll do a test of tomorrow. Maybe we would spend maybe 20 minutes for this on test class of tomorrow. And so what is next in my agenda is I would write a VF class to do the same activity which we are talking about this. And it's not showing here. So if you could see this window, so where you try to enter the number and you fetch the results. So we will have a VF page, and they will have their associate controller, and how we are calling the end system results and checking it out. So we'll do a real-time test there in VF page, and I'll give the ideas of what are the key tags that we have, and how do we write a simple logic program to get such logic to be working. So that way our VF also would be completed, and other next week what is our focus would be on is our LWC and the new things like how do you do a source controlling and other CPQs or any other products that we have in Salesforce. How do we really look into them? So that those things I'll give a demonstration. Okay, so are we good?
Yeah,
Yeah, perfect. So okay, we'll meet up tomorrow the same time. Thank you guys.
Okay,
sure.
thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Raj. Thank you, Kumar. Thank you, Mati. Bye.